Hey there, I'm Nick.
And I'm Lewis.
Welcome to the Collective Cast, a podcast by and for indie app developers.
We're here to have an open and honest conversation about the highs and lows of app development.
So this week, we're actually going to start off with a follow-up on last week where Lewis and I were talking about analytics. Lewis actually has a really interesting story about one of the tools he was using in his apps that he mentioned called, I believe, Ground Control. Lewis, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned last time that I was using Ground Control as a way of having a remote plist file that I could use to change config, on the fly without having to do a new version. And I was planning to use that to kind of ramp up my kind of nagging of my users, to put it bluntly, like just the users who are free on my World Clock app. I wanted to gently increase the amount of times I was showing them a particular message. And so I had a setting that was in this remote defaults file, which was like, show this message one time in 30 uses. And then I could change that, and my plan was, like I say, was to just slowly bring it forward and see what the result of that was, and if I could increase my revenue.
Right. It's kind of like what we were saying maybe a few episodes back about how far do you want to go down the path of nagging, right? Like we look at those terrible apps that are all ads and upgrade screens and everything, and we obviously don't want to be those, but we also want to actually have revenue from our apps.
Exactly. We see those apps in the top grossing, and we think, what the and how can we kind of get closer to them without being them? That was kind of my goal. And so I was using this component called Ground Control, which was by Matt Thompson, and it's really fantastic. Or it was at the time, but it's now a bit out of date, and it's no longer being updated. It hasn't been updated for 3 years, and I had to kind of put this hack in to get it to work for me specifically. And I was just thinking, I'm going to be using this a lot, this idea a lot, so why don't I see what's involved in making my own version of this? And I had a look, and there's actually not much to it. You get a lot of it out of the box, and it's just kind of bringing some bits together. And so I decided to go ahead and make this thing myself.
Nice.
And so I did that, and I was pretty happy with it. And I was also putting in some extra analytics and stuff like that. And so I went ahead and released a new version of World Time, which had my own version of Ground Control in, and it also had this extra analytics. And then while I was waiting for that to be approved by Apple, I went ahead and started on doing some A/B testing. So I wanted to start A/B testing the different messages that I was showing to the users, basically to see if I change the wording, can I increase the conversion rate? So then kind of a day later or whatever it was, it got approved by Apple, and it went out into the world. And it was that point that I discovered that there was a crash bug if there was no network connection.
Input algorithm not accepted.
No!
Well, exactly. So what I should have said was I found that it had a crash bug, and I quickly realized that it was a network when there was no network connectivity. And so that made me feel a bit better, but still pretty bad. And, it's one of those things which there's no excuse really for something like that happening. And so I put a fix in and submitted that. But because my version control isn't as hot as it should be, sometimes I'm very good at it. If I do something which I know is very risky, I do the proper branching and take release branches and do all the git flow goodness. But other times I'm more lazy and it doesn't happen. And so I had all this A/B testing code in the app, and I commented all that out and then released it with this fix for the crash bug. But it turns out that what I didn't comment out was a bit that was to show this nag message. So I've been testing this nag message with the A/B testing, and so I just have this flag in my code which is like, just ignore all of the random variables, just set it to yes and always show it.
Right, kind of like when you're testing locally and you need to run something like 50 times, so you just have like a debug equals true, and it just kind of hits you with it every time so you can rapidly test different messages or colors or placements and stuff.
Exactly. And if I'd been doing this in Objective-C, I would have done the if debug. And for whatever reason, this was Swift, and I don't know why. I've done it in Swift, and I just didn't do it. It's totally my fault. I'm not blaming Swift at all, but I think it's just because I didn't know how to do it, and I was trying to do, to carry on.
Sure.
And so that exactly would have prevented this situation. And so that I released that, and then I realized not long afterwards that I was just always showing this message, and that was really stressful as well. And that was even worse because that's obviously totally my fault and totally avoidable. And it's just when you've done something under pressure and you've done it wrong, it just compounds everything, and you feel pretty bad. And so so that was out, and then again I fixed I fixed that and put it back out, and it was kind of all fine. Well, at least it wasn't all fine. Everything was working, but there was still, it felt like forever while people are upgrading, to the right version.
Right.
As of today, it's only about 56% of people that are on the current version that doesn't show this nag. Yesterday I was just looking at it like, why isn't this number going up?
Do you know if the other 44% are all on the previous bug version, or could some of them be on even older versions?
Some of them are on older versions, but the majority were on the bug version. Let's have a look at what it is.
Gotcha.
Right now, just make this window a bit bigger. So I've got the current version. The correct version is at 57%. The mega bad version is at 16%, and the one before that, which was the highest crashing one, is at 6.8%. And then the one before that is at 12%. So most people are on the right one, but it is slower than I would ideally like.
So it sounds like 2/3 of your users are fine because they're either on a sufficiently old version or a sufficiently new version.
Yeah, exactly. So now it's pretty much okay. So there's 16% who are on the worst version. Yeah. So to recap, first of all, I had a version that was just affecting about 16% of users and it was crashing for those 16%. And then I put in a fix for that, but accidentally put it so that 100% of non-paid users were just seeing this message in their today view. They swipe down, and they should see the world times, but instead it says, you've used this app 3 times. Would you consider making a payment to Lewis? I can't remember the exact wording, but that is the tone of it, is that it's like, just give me some money, but in a friendly way.
You have now used this app 4 times. In fact, you have now used this app 5 times.
Exactly. And on that widget, people are, whether they're going to look at the times or not, people are looking at that notification screen a lot of times. And so that is by far and away the most popular place where people interact with my app. And it's also a place which generally feels pretty sacrosanct, if that's the word, for doing that. You're not allowed to put ads in there. That's against Apple's terms. But so part of my interest was to put this message in here and see what kind of, that's, I think, as far as I can tell, that's allowed. And it just to see what the impact of that was. But like I said at the beginning, my plan was to slowly ramp this up. And instead, what I've just done is gone from hardly showing it to just extreme all the time in your face.
You went like full turbo right away.
I went full turbo, exactly, and not in a way that I would ever have done it on purpose. And in my mind, this is a catastrophic situation. And obviously, or at the time, it was a catastrophic situation. And now it's kind of moved on and time has passed and I know what's happened. But I'm interested to see what you think would have happened off the back of this. So the areas that are kind of particularly relevant, I guess, are reviews and to a lesser extent, customer feedback. And then also money. Like, do you think that I would have had a big drop in money or a big increase in money, or what do you think would happen? So what's your first instinct as to what has happened to me as a result of this 24 hours or so of having this super annoying version of the app be out there?
Okay, so without giving it too much deep analysis, I'm going to actually assume the opposite of what I would naturally think, and I'm going to say that actually probably worked. My gut would be that actually a small percentage of users really did upgrade because they're like, I like this app, these messages are annoying as but I want to keep using it. So here's your 99 cents, you greedy bastard. And then I do feel like some people might be like, ugh, blurg, delete. And even though you would think you would get a mountain of negative reviews about this, I feel like we as iPhone users are so conditioned to the upsell that it's sadly not out of the realm of normality to be constantly pestered for an update. Whether it's in a kind or hammer over the head way. So I feel like you probably lost a few users, but you probably gained sales about half of what the losers you lost. That's my first thought.
Okay, so in terms of revenue, you think there would be double the revenue of normal?
I don't necessarily think double, but I actually think I think you will see a bump from people who want to use it and excuse the behavior, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, that does make sense.
Because I personally have done that, not with an app necessarily that bangs it over your head every time, but there are some apps where it's quite persistent, and I'm like, fine.
Sure. Yeah, okay. So let's you can put in a drum roll sound effect here, and I can tell you, in fact, exactly what the difference was. So on an average day, the app would make between the World Time would make between 20 and 30 pounds a day. That's probably the average, just scrolling through. First day of the Insano Nag, it made 120 pounds.
Holy crap!
So I think it's fair to say that this, is that the nagging is effective. And so the possible kind of downsides of that would be, like we said, a lot of bad reviews or just a lot of people just abandoning ship and going away. And so in terms of bad reviews, in terms of people going away, it's a bit early to say, but it looks like I lost about 15% of views of the widget on day over day. You can assume that that's users as well, that I lost 15% of users who they've just stopped using it.
So, at a high level, you lost 15% of users, but had at least a temporary 6x increase in revenue.
Exactly. And in terms of reviews, the reviews actually weren't that bad. So I got, I think, 2 negative reviews and about 8 kind of 1-star reviews or 1-star ratings. But in that time, I still had hundreds of 5-star ratings, or like 200, I think, 5-star ratings.
Right. And since you released a bunch of rapid updates anyways, those 1-star reviews are basically going to be washed away.
Exactly. And the great thing now is that you can reply and say, yeah, oops, I made a mistake. Kind of forgive me, and this won't happen again. So all in all, I don't really know how I feel about it. Like today, so that was the money for 2 days ago. The money for today doesn't show up in App Annie yet, but it was basically about the same. So I've had 2 days where it's really high, and as kind of people are working away from upgrading, they will stop going down. So I guess the next thing to think about is what should I do next? Like,
oh my god, yeah.
So one idea I've got is to basically leave it really low and then just do, like, every so often just turn it up to that. So in a controlled way, do like a 24-hour period where I just set it really high. Probably not every time, but like 1 in 2 or something like that. I think the thing I definitely wouldn't do is show it to new users. So I think I've got this thing where I can have a threshold that they must have seen it, whatever many times. And I think I would leave that and maybe just have a 24-hour period where I really pester and then, excuse me, and then I ramp it back down. Or the other option will be to do as I was doing before and to just gently turn it up. But maybe I would turn it up a bit faster than I did before.
This, it's funny, the way you were describing it, it reminds me of when podcasts like and WNYC podcasts do annual pledge drives,
right?
And like a Radiolab show or something like that, where 9/10 of the year nothing, and then every podcast for like a month is, hey, why don't you pitch in a couple bucks?
Sure.
And kind of like if we take like the long view of this, you had an app where you basically did not nag, right? Like that was the whole point. You were trying to gently, slowly put a nag in. Instead, you went full dark side, but it actually had kind of a pledge drive effect.
Yeah, that's it. And so you build up a period of trust, and then you go for a real aggressive push. Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it.
It's like because like I was actually really confident that you were going to lose a few users, but you would also just get people who were going to pay. I didn't think it would be quite so lopsided, but it really kind of does speak to our conditioning, right? As app users, the fact that like to you and me, like that would maybe be like a one-time only mistake you could make.
And you know what else was interesting? Apple isn't just bringing the screen up so I can give the exact numbers. But I think we've talked before about how I have 3 tiers. So basically, you have all the same. There's 3 options for paying, and they all give the same thing. And there's 2 more expensive ones, which are basically a tip. So it's like you get the functionality, and you give me a bit of extra because you're a nice person. And it's kind of like buy me a coffee is one of them. I think is the one I like as an example. And what I would have expected from something like this was that really the cheapest one would be the one that went up the most, and that the others wouldn't have really gone up. And it was certainly true that the cheapest one went up the most, but actually the kind of non-cheapest ones also did take a big jump. So yeah, that most expensive one took a jump. Let's just narrow it down so I can say exactly. So yeah, maybe not as much as I thought actually. It did go up though, so yeah.
It's interesting the way you bring it up because you would think that the aggressive tactic might get you, yeah, like you said, like the lowest in-app purchase, but not necessarily like a tip boon.
Exactly.
And it's almost like, how like everybody has a family member who is tone deaf in like their emails and texts, so it's like it's very blunt with lots of periods, and it feels very aggressive if you didn't know that they just suck at email.
Yeah, all caps.
Yes, exactly, or like all caps. It's like it's almost like that. It's like, to me, if I saw a message like that from a developer, I would take it as being pretty hostile. But like, it's possible that a lot of your users just saw it and they're like, yeah, I'll upgrade.
Yeah, sure. And I guess what I couldn't work out from analytics is, so the majority of users, because the message says how many times you've used it. If it's like you've used this app twice or you've used this app once, I mean, that is just really bad. But there will be people who have seen the widget 500 times, and then they will be thinking, actually, maybe it is fair to send over some money.
Yeah, and actually, do you know how many times the message was shown before someone did a purchase? Because say that use case you just had. Someone has had the app for 6 months. They've opened it every day. They open it yesterday. They see this message, and then they go and upgrade. Well, then they wouldn't see it again. Like, even though your code is showing it to them every time, that's only before they've paid. So you really might only see it once or twice.
Yeah, so that isn't something I'd thought of, but I don't think I could get that from the analytics because I can't get or at least I haven't been able to work it out. This is the kind of stuff where I wish I was a real analytics ninja. But yeah, that would be interesting. How many times has the prompt been shown before the user actually goes ahead and buys and or stops using the app altogether?
Right, because I actually, my hunch would be it's actually a lot smaller. Like, someone would see your prompt, and probably, I would say, once or twice before they act. So while you might be freaking out because you're like, oh my god, it's showing up 50 times, the average user might only see it 2 times and just be like, cool, or meh. And it also occurs to me that some people, like, a lot of people don't necessarily understand if it's actually reloading when you go back into the notification center. So some people might think it's the same message that's just there. Like it shows up in the Today widget, and until you take action, it doesn't go away. Like they might have thought it's just one message.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, there's a button there to say no thanks. And so they tap that, and then it shows the times. And then if they reloaded the widget, they would have seen the prompt again. So it would really be hassling them. Let's have a look. How do I get to do this?
I think this is also as a follow-up from last week on analytics. Just like track everything. Even if you don't think you would use it, if you have something that isn't just a one-off, like I'm gonna show release notes and then never show release notes again, like just throw a flag in your settings somewhere so that you can come back to it.
Yes, I think I agree with that. I almost lean more towards doing real like experiments, because that kind of scattergun approach, I kind of see the logic of that, but really you need to be answering specific questions, and the scattergun approach may or may not give you answers to those questions.
Totally fair. Yeah, I wasn't actually thinking in terms of specifics. I meant it's more like, if you shoot a photo in RAW, you can edit it however you want later because you have all the data in the photo. I was thinking it like that, like don't leave any like data on the floor that you could have been collecting, but I realize that's probably a bit unrealistic.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily bad, but I think that yeah, you're right. So it is a good idea to it's different ways of looking at it, and that is kind of what I was trying to do. But I think also the most bang for buck comes from working like, so say, how many times does someone view the prompt before they buy or stop using the app? That is a useful information, and you wouldn't necessarily, I guess what I'm trying to say is the most useful information I don't think you'll get necessarily from a scattergun approach. So you will get good information, but you won't necessarily get exactly what you want to know. If to get exactly what you want to know, you have to code to answer a specific question.
What I was saying was just like gathered data, and what you're saying is you have to actually craft the user story, which could be comprised of several pieces of data that have no meaning separately.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so the scattergun approach isn't like a waste of time, and you will potentially get useful data. It depends on the app as well. So something like this app where it has one screen, putting it in, it's more difficult to get things. Whereas in my other app, like I've got 5 tabs, and like knowing which tab they use the most is genuinely useful information, and which screen they use the most.
Right, exactly. Or like, for example, I have my tipping advice app, and like if I had metrics on how often they change countries versus how many times they like invoke the tip calculator, I could infer behaviors from those without actually knowing what I want. But if I wanted to know like how many in-app purchases people make, maybe I could use that data to figure out how many countries they looked at before they bought. But I still might need to like code that entire workflow in to get the most value out of it.
Yeah, it's possible that actually that for general app usage, that the general scattergun is the way to go. But then for more specific, like especially buying, like how people spend money, then really telling a story of what people do. That's really when you need to do that, I think.
Yeah, like what you're talking about is almost like, it's like you're doing a case study.
Yeah, exactly. Or I would like to do one, yeah.
Oh, I think it's really fascinating that like the thing all developers do, you use something that's cool, you realize there's a problem, you accidentally release it, you freak the out, you try to fix it really fast. In fixing it, you even worse, and then like something amazing happens afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. I can say that it has not been my experience though where something amazing has happened afterwards before. So I feel really, really lucky in this case.
Well, at the very least, even if it hadn't been this and it had truly just gone horribly wrong, it still would have been a really valuable learning experience, just not with the happy button.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm just going to bring it up. I want to read one thing that one of my customers said to me in email when I was telling them that I'd been having a stressed out day and stuff. And he said, "I appreciate the quick fix. In Alaska, we step outside, breathe the air, and watch the wildlife to keep us stress-free. Keep your head up and your day will get better, my friend." And I was like, wow, that's pretty nice. That is probably what I should have done. So there you go. Those Alaskan guys, they know what they're about.
That's great. I love that. And after all of that data intensity, we're going to switch to something a little more silly, where we each discuss a crazy app idea from our files. So, Lewis, how about I go first for this, since you just kind of gave us this amazing story. My crazy app idea for this week is actually just like a really stupidly easy coloring book. Like, there's so many apps out there that are like really detailed adult coloring book where like I start obsessing over like fish scales, and instead I want an app where it's like it starts off with like a circle, tap the circle, then there's like 4 circles, and something like just like level 0 Zen, like tap tap color tap tap color. That's my idea.
Yeah, that sounds good, and that kind of would make it. Maybe make it quite addictive. To just keep going up. Yeah, it sounds nice.
Yeah, like I was just thinking like super simple, like almost like meditative coloring.
And you know what? Those guys make hella money. You can always see them in the top grossing charts with their massive subscription models for new pictures and stuff.
That's true. Could be a new App Collective idea.
Yeah, I think so.
What have you got for us?
Okay, my idea is not really my idea, but it was still on my big sheet of things to do. And Was it iOS 8 where they introduced the make your own keyboard, or not make your own keyboard, custom keyboards. That's the
Sure,
word.
sure, somewhere around there.
Yeah, and I saw this tutorial, which was like, what's the most basic idea for a keyboard you could make to show in a tutorial? It is, of course, a holder keyboard. So all it does is there's a big button and you say holder, and then it puts holder into the thing. And I kind of thought this was actually genius and really should exist. And I kind of assume that the reason it doesn't is because of HBO's lawyers coming in there and shutting them down. But I was looking at it when I went through this, and there is one on the Google Play Store that is there and costs $2, I think it was. So you can give someone on Android money for this. But I couldn't find it on iOS. I found something for it on Product Hunt, and then the app didn't exist anymore. So there was a few minutes where I was like, I might just make this and just to see what happens. But I don't know. The threat of the legal action does kind of does scare me a little bit. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should just consult a lawyer and see what they would say if I don't use any Game of Thrones stuff. Would that be okay?
Yeah, I'm like half inclined to think that that is amazing, and half I just want to be like, too soon.
Too soon. Yeah, fair enough.
The App Collective cast is created by us, Nick and Lewis. I do all the editing myself, so please be kind.
If you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review in iTunes so other devs can find the show. You can find us on Twitter. Nick's at nsneebly, and I'm Itinerant Dev, and the show is at App Collective Co. You can also contact us on the website. We'd really love to hear your feedback, good or bad.
Finally, we'd love it if you join us on Patreon. It's dangerous to go alone, and even $1 helps support us directly as app developers. There's loads of perks, and we've got a great Slack community to discuss current and future apps. You can check it all out at podcast.appcollective.co.
Hold on.